Well, thank you all so much for joining us this evening. We ask that all audience members remain muted until the end of the program. It's my great pleasure to be able to welcome you all here this evening on behalf of the organizing committee. Special thanks to Barbara Fleith, Denise Leslie, Francis Prestiani, Joyce Trotman Jordan, and Pam Wakefield, and the organizations they represent. Along with the Princeton Public Library, we had Nassau Presbyterian Church and the Witherspoon Street Presbyterian Church, and their joint mission committee. Not in Our Town, Princeton, the Paul Robeson House of Princeton, McCarter Theater, Unitarian Universalist Congregation, and the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Princeton. We are also proudly joined by a whole host of community partners. I think this is part of what really makes this event special, is having so many organizations joining us in community to celebrate the words of Douglas. We have the African American Cultural Collaborative of Mercer County, Arm in Arm, the Arts Council of Princeton, the Baha'i Community of Princeton, Bayard Rustin Center for Social Justice, Building the Moral Arc, CASA for Children of Mercer and Burlington Counties, the Center for Modern Aging Princeton, Coalition for Peace Action, Greater Somerset YMCA, the Historical Society of Princeton, Housing Initiatives of Princeton, Trenton, the John H. Pace Jr. 39 Center for Civic Engagement, the League of Women Voters of Greater Princeton Area, Latin American Legal Defense and Education Fund, the Mass Incarceration Task Force, McCarter Theater Center, Morningstar Church of God in Christ, Morven Museum and Garden, Muslim Center of Greater Princeton, Mount Pisgah A.M.E. Church, Princeton Charter School, Princeton Day School Black Alumni, the Princeton Jewish Center, Princeton Middle School, Princeton United Methodist Church, the Office of Community and Regional Affairs at Princeton University, the Stoutsburg Sourland African American Museum, Trenton Literacy Movement, Trenton Spoken Word, Unitarian Universalist Church, United Mercer Interfaith Organization, Westminster Presbyterian Church, Witherspoon Jackson Historical and Cultural Society, and the YWCA of Princeton. We're very lucky to have had some wonderful convening speakers over the last few years, and I'm delighted that the tradition continues with the much loved Reverend Dave Davis of Nassau Presbyterian Church. Thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you, Dave, for bringing us together this evening.
Thank you, Kim. Good evening and welcome to our community reading of Frederick Douglass' July 4th speech from July 5th, 1852. We invite you tonight to hear and see an incredibly diverse gathering of readers that represent.
You get mute. Dave, we lost you. I think it's somehow you got muted. Hang on a second.
We invite you tonight to hear and see an incredibly diverse gathering of readers that represent the breadth of the community in which we live, the communities in which we live. But we also invite you to hear again, or maybe for the first time, the relentlessly relevant and chillingly timeless words of Frederick Douglass. His indictment of the evil of slavery and his convicting invoking of the Constitution of the United States, so under threat these days, brings a shameful resonance to the days we find ourselves living in, with racism, hatred, and bigotry of absolutely every kind on the rise exponentially. This holiday weekend, we have witnessed despicable political rhetoric, random acts of hate, and neo-Nazis marching on the streets of Nashville, Tennessee. In a country longing for great orators who speak of justice, righteousness, equity, and peace, let this speech of Frederick Douglass be a salve for our ears, a balm for our soul, and a spark that only adds more fire to our determination to work locally and beyond for the common good. And now, what to the slave is the 4th of July? Mr. President, friends and fellow citizens, the task before me is one which requires much previous thought and study for its proper performance. I do not remember ever to have appeared as a speaker before any assembly, more shrinkingly nor with greater distrust of my ability than I do this day. The papers and placards say that I am to deliver a 4th of July oration. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, the distance between this platform and the slave plantation from which I escaped is considerable, and the difficulties to be overcome in getting from the latter to the former are by no means slight. That I am here today is, to me, a matter of astonishment as well as of gratitude.
This, for the purpose of this celebration, is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your national independence and of your political freedom. This to you is what the Passover was to the emancipated people of God. It carries your minds back to the day and to the act of your great deliverance. This celebration also marks the beginning of another year of your national life and reminds you that the Republic of America is now 76 years old. I am glad, fellow citizens, that your nation is so young. You are even now only in the beginning of your national career, still lingering in the period of childhood. I repeat, I am glad this is so. There is hope in the thought, and hope is much needed under the dark clouds which lower above the horizon.
Fellow citizens, 76 years ago, the people of this country were British subjects. The style and title of your sovereign people, in which you now glory, was not then born. You were under the British crown. Your fathers esteemed the English government as the home government, England as the fatherland, although a considerable distance from your home, imposed, in the exercise of its parental prerogatives, upon its colonial children, such restraints, burdens, and limitations as, in its mature judgment, it deemed wise, right, and proper.
But your fathers, who had not adopted the idea of the infallibility of government and the absolute character of its acts, presumed to differ from the home government in respect to the wisdom and the justice of some of those burdens and restraints. They went so far as to pronounce the measures of government unjust, unreasonable, and oppressive, and altogether such as ought not to be quietly submitted to. I scarcely need say, fellow citizens, that my opinion of those measures fully accords with that of your fathers, feeling themselves harshly and unjustly treated by the home government. Your fathers, like men of honesty and men of spirit, earnestly sought redress. They petitioned and remonstrated. They did so in a decorous, respectful, and loyal manner. This, however, did not answer the purpose. They saw themselves treated with sovereign indifference, coldness, and scorn. Yet they persevered.
Oppression makes a wise man mad. Your fathers became restive under this treatment. They felt themselves the victims of grievous wrongs, wholly incurable in their colonial capacity. With brave men, there's always a remedy for oppression. Just here, the idea of a total separation of the colonies from the crown was born. It was a startling idea, much more so than we, at this distance of time, regard it. The timid and the prudent of that day were, of course, shocked and alarmed by it. Their opposition to the then dangerous thought was earnest and powerful. But amid all their terror and affrighted vociferations against it, the alarming and revolutionary idea moved on, and the country with it.
On the 2nd of July, 1776, the Old Continental Congress, to the dismay of the lovers of ease and the worshippers of property, clothed that dreadful idea with all the authority of national sanction. It did so in the form of a resolution. We seldom hit upon resolutions, drawn up in our day, whose transparency is at all equal. It resolved that these united colonies are, and of right, ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown.
Citizens, your fathers made good that resolution. They succeeded, and today you reap the fruits of their success. The freedom gained is yours, and you therefore may properly celebrate this anniversary. The 4th of July is the first great fact in your nation's history, the very ring bolt in the chain of your yet undeveloped destiny.
Pride and patriotism, not less than gratitude, prompt you to celebrate and to hold it in perpetual remembrance. I have said that the Declaration of Independence is a ring bolt to the chain of your nation's destiny. And so indeed I regard it. The principles contained in that instrument are saving principles. Stand by those principles. Be true to them on all occasions, in all places, against all foes, and at whatever cost.
Fellow citizens, I am not wanting in respect for the fathers of this republic. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. I cannot contemplate their great deeds with less than admiration. They were statesmen, patriots, and heroes. And for the good they did and the principles they contended for, I will unite with you to honor their memory.
They loved their country better than their own private interests, and all will concede that it is a rare virtue that ought to command respect. He who will intelligently lay down his life for his country is a man who is not in human nature to despise. Your fathers staked their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor on the cause of their country. In their admiration of liberty, they lost sight of all other interests.
They were peacemen, but they preferred revolution to peaceful submission to bondage. They were quiet men, but they did not shrink from agitation against oppression. They showed forbearance, but they knew its limits. They believed in order, but not in the order of tyranny. With them, nothing was settled that was not right. With them, justice, liberty, and humanity were final, not slavery and oppression. You may well cherish the memory of such men. They were great in their day and generation. Their solid manhood stands out the more as we contrast it with these degenerate times.
How circumspect, exact, and proportionate were all their movements. How unlike the politicians of an hour. Their statesmanship looked beyond the passing moment and stretched away in strength into the distant future. Mark them. Fully appreciating the hardship to be encountered, firmly believing in the right of their cause, wisely measuring the terrible odds against them. Your fathers, the fathers of this republic, laid the cornerstone of the national superstructure, which has risen and still rises in grandeur around you.
Of this fundamental work, this day is the anniversary. Our eyes are met with demonstrations of joyous enthusiasm. The causes which led to the separation of the colonies from the British Crown have never lacked for a tongue. They have all been taught in your common schools, narrated at your firesides, unfolded from your pulpits, and thundered from your legislative halls, and are as familiar to you as household words. They form the staple of your national poetry and eloquence. I leave, therefore, the great deeds of your fathers to others.
My business, if I have any here today, is with the present. The accepted time with God and his cause is the ever-living now. We have to do with the past only as we can make it useful to the present and to the future. Now is the time, the important time. Your fathers have lived, died, and have done their work, and have done much of it well. You live and must die, and you must do your work. You have no right to enjoy a child's share in the labor of your fathers unless your children are to be blessed by your labors. You have no right to wear out and waste the hard-earned fame of your fathers to cover your indolence.
Fellow citizens, pardon me. Allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom, of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I, therefore, called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us?
Would to God, both for your sakes and ours, that an affirmative answer could be truthfully returned to these questions. Then would my task be light and my burden easy and delightful. But such is not the state of the case. I say it with a sad sense of the disparity between us. I am not included with the pale of the glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us.
The blessings in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. The 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. To drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and call upon him to join you in joyous anthems were inhuman mockery and sacrilegious irony. Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak today?
Fellow citizens, above your national tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful wail of millions whose chains, heavy and grievous yesterday, are today rendered more intolerable by the jubilee shouts that reach them. To forget them, to pass lightly over their wrongs, and to chime in with the popular theme would be treason, most scandalous and shocking, and would make me a reproach before God and the world.
My subject, then fellow citizens, is American slavery. I shall see this day from the slave's point of view, standing here, identified with the American bondman, making his wrongs mine. I do not hesitate to declare with all my soul that the character and conduct of this nation never looked blacker to me than on this 4th of July. Whether we turn to the declarations of the past or to the professions of the present. The conduct of the nation seems equally hideous and revolting. America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false to the future.
Standing with God and the crushed and bleeding slave on this occasion, I will, in the name of humanity, which is outraged, in the name of liberty, which is feathered, in the name of the Constitution and the Bible, which are disregarded and trampled upon, there to call in question and to denounce with all the emphasis I can command everything that serves to perpetuate slavery, the great sin and shame of America. I will not equivocate. I will not excuse. I will use the severest language I can command. And yet, not one word shall escape me that any man whose judgment is not blinded by prejudice or who is not at heart a slaveholder shall not confess to be right and just.
I fancy I hear someone of my audience say, it is just in this circumstance that you and your brother abolitionists failed to make a favorable impression on the public mind. Would you argue more and denounce less? Would you persuade more and rebuke less? Your cause would be much more likely to succeed. But I submit, where all is plain, there is nothing to be argued. What point of the anti-slavery creed would you have me argue? On what branch of the subject do the people of this country need light?
Must I undertake to prove the slave is a man? The slaveholders themselves acknowledge it in the enactment of laws for their government. They acknowledge it when they punish disobedience on the part of the slave. There are 72 crimes in the state of Virginia which, if committed by a Black man, subject him to the punishment of death, while only 2 of the same crimes will subject a white man to the like punishment. What is this but the acknowledgement that the slave is a moral, intellectual, and responsible being?
Southern statute books are covered with enactments forbidding, under severe fines and penalties, the teaching of the slave to read or to write. When you can point to any such laws in reference to the beasts of the fields, then I may consent to argue the manhood of the slave. When the dogs in your streets, when the fowls of the air, when the cattle on your hills, when the fish of the sea and the reptiles that crawl shall be unable to distinguish the slave from a brute, then I will argue with you that the slave is a man.
Is it not astonishing that while we are plowing, planting, and reaping, using all kinds of mechanical tools, erecting houses, constructing bridges, building ships, working in metals of brass, iron, copper, silver, and gold, that while we are reading, writing, and ciphering, acting as clerks and merchants and secretaries, having among us lawyers, doctors, ministers, poets, authors, editors, orators, and teachers, that while we are engaged in all manner of enterprises, coming to other men, digging gold in California, capturing the whale in the Pacific, feeding sheep and cattle on the hillside, living, moving, acting, thinking, planning, living in families as husbands, wives, and children, and above all, confessing and worshiping the Christian's God, looking hopefully for life and immortality beyond the grave, we are called upon to prove that we are men.
Would you have me argue
that man is entitled to liberty, that he is the rightful owner of his own body? You have already declared it. Must I argue the wrongfulness of slavery? Is it to be settled by the rules of logic and argumentation as a matter beset with great difficulty, involving a doubtful application of the principle of justice, hard to be understood? How should I look today in the presence of Americans to show that men have a natural right to freedom? To do so would be to make myself ridiculous and to offer an insult to your understanding. There is not a man beneath the canopy of heaven that does not know that slavery is wrong for him.
What? Am I to argue that it is wrong to make men brutes, to rob them of their liberty, to work them without wages, to keep them ignorant of their relations to their fellow men, to beat them with sticks, to flay their flesh with the lash, to load their limbs with irons, to hunt them with dogs, to sell them at auction, to sunder their families, to knock out their teeth, to burn their flesh, to starve them into obedience and submission to their masters? Must I argue that a system thus marked with blood and stained with pollution is wrong? No, I will not. I have better employments for my time and strength than such arguments would imply.
What then remains to be argued? Is it that slavery is not divine, that God did not establish it, that our doctors of divinity are mistaken? There is blasphemy in the thought. That which is inhuman cannot be divine. Who can reason on such a proposition? I cannot. The time for such argument is past.
At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument, is needed. Oh, had I the ability and could I reach the nation's ear, I would today pour out a fiery stream of biting ridicule, blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke. For it is not light that is needed, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. The feeling of the nation must be quickened. The conscience of the nation must be roused. The propriety of the nation must be startled. The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed. And its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced.
What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him, more than all other days in the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is constrained to victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty, an unholy license, your national greatness, swelling vanity. Your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless, your denunciations of tyrants, brass-fronted impotence. Your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery. Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings with all your religious parade and solemnity are to him more bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy, a thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages.
There is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States at this very hour. Go where you may, search where you will, roam through all the monarchy, the despotisms of the old world, search out every abuse, and when you have found the last, lay your facts by the side of the everyday practices of this nation, and you will say with me that, for revolting barbarity and shameless hypocrisy, America reigns without a rival.
Take the American slave trade, which we are all told by the papers is especially prosperous just now, as the price of men was never higher, and which is carried on in all the large towns and cities in one half of this Confederacy. This trade is one of the peculiarities of American institutions. In several states, this trade is a chief source of wealth. It is called the internal slave trade, in order to divert from it the horror with which the foreign slave trade is contemplated.
The foreign slave trade has long since been denounced by this government as piracy, as inexorable traffic. To attest it, this nation keeps a squadron at immense cost on the coast of Africa. Everywhere in this country, it is safe to speak of this foreign slave trade as a most inhuman traffic, opposed alike to the laws of God and of man. It is, however, a notable fact that, while so much execration is poured out by Americans upon these engaged in this foreign slave trade, the men engaged in the slave trade between the state pass without condemnation, and their business is deemed honorable.
Behold the practical operation of this internal slave trade, the American slave trade, sustained by American politics and American religion. Here you will see men and women reared like swine for the market. You know what is a swine drover? I will show you a man drover. They inhabit all our southern states. They perambulate the country and crowd the highways of the nation with droves of human stock. You will see one of these human flesh jobbers, armed with pistol, whip, and bowie knife, driving a company of 100 men, women, and children from the Potomac to the slave market at New Orleans. These wretched people are to be sold singly or in lots to suit purchasers. They are food for the cotton field and the deadly sugar mill.
Mark the sad procession as it moves wearily along, and the human wretch who drives them. Hear his savage yells and his blood-chilling oaths as he hurries on his affrighted captives. There, see the old man with his locks thinned and gray. Cast one glance, if you please, upon that young mother whose shoulders are bare to the scorching sun, her briny tears falling on the brow of the babe in her arms. See too that girl of 19 weeping, yes, weeping, as she thinks of the mother from whom she has been torn. The drove moves tardily. Heat and sorrow have nearly consumed their strength. But suddenly, you hear a quick snap, like the discharge of a rifle. The fetters clank and the chain rattles simultaneously. Your ears are saluted with a scream that seems to have torn its way to the center of your soul. The crack you heard was the sound of the slave whip. The scream you heard was from the woman you saw with the babe. Her speed had faltered under the weight of her child and her chains. That gash on her shoulder tells her to move on.
Follow this drove to New Orleans. Attend the auction. See men examined like horses. See the forms of women rudely and brutally exposed to the shocking gaze of American slave buyers. See this drove sold and separated forever. And never forget the deep, sad sobs that arose from that scattered multitude. Tell me, citizens, where, under the sun, you can witness a spectacle more fiendish and shocking. Yet this is but a glance at the American slave trade as it exists at this moment in the ruling part of the United States.
I was born amidst such sights and scenes. To me, the American slave trade is a terrible reality. The fleshmongers gather up their victims by the dozens and drive them chained to the General Depot at Baltimore. When a sufficient number has been collected here, a ship is chartered for the purpose of conveying the forlorn crew to Mobile or to New Orleans. From the slave prison to the ship, they are usually driven in the darkness of night, in the deep, still darkness of midnight. I have often been aroused by the dead, heavy footsteps and the petitious cries of the chain gangs that passed our door.
Fellow citizens, this murderous traffic is today in active operation in this boasted republic. In the solitude of my spirit, I see clouds of dust raised on the highways of the South. I see the bleeding footsteps. I hear the doleful wail of fettered humanity on the way to the slave markets, where the victims are to be sold like horses, sheep, and swine, knocked off to the highest bidder. There, I see the tenderest ties ruthlessly broken to gratify the lust, caprice, and rapacity of the buyers and sellers of men. My soul sickens at the sight.
But a still more inhuman, disgraceful, and scandalous state of things remains to be presented. By an act of the American Congress, not yet 2 years old, slavery has been nationalized in its most horrible and revolting form. Mason and Dixon's line has been obliterated. New York has become as Virginia, and the power to hold, hand, and sell men, women, and children as slaves remains no longer a mere state institution, but is now an institution of the whole United States.
Power is coextensive with the Star-Spangled Banner and American Christianity. Where these go, may also go the merciless slave hunter. Where these are, man is not sacred. He is a bird for the sportsman's gun. But that most foul and fiendish of all human decrees, the liberty and person of every man are put in peril. Your broad Republican domain is hunting ground for men.
Your lawmakers have commanded all good citizens to engage in this hellish sport. Your president, your secretary of state enforce as a duty that you owe to your free and glorious country and to God that you do this accursed thing. Not fewer than 40 Americans have within the past 2 years been hunted down and without a moment's warning hurried away in chains and consigned to slavery and to excruciating torture. Some of these have had wives and children dependent on them for bread, but of all of this, no account was made. The right of the hunter to his prey stands superior to the right of marriage and to all rights in this republic, the rights of God included.
For Black men, there is neither law nor justice, humanity nor religion. The fugitive slave law makes mercy to them a crime and bribes the judge who tries them. An American judge gets $10 for every victim he consigns to slavery, and 5 when he fails to do so. The oath of any 2 villains is insufficient under this hell-black enactment to send the most pious and exemplary Black men into the remorseless jaws of slavery. His own testimony is nothing. He can bring no witnesses for himself. The minister of American justice is bound by the law to hear but one side, and that side is the side of the oppressor.
Let this damning fact be perpetually told. Let it be thundered around the world that in tyrant-killing, king-hating, people-loving, democratic, Christian America, the seats of justice are filled with judges who hold their offices under an open and palpable bribe and are bound, in deciding the case of man's liberty, to hear only his accusers.
In glaring violation of justice, in shameless disregard of the forms of administering law, in cunning arrangement to entrap the defenseless, and in diabolical intent, this fugitive slave law stands alone in the annals of tyrannical legislation.
Americans, your Republican politics, not less than your Republican religion, are flagrantly inconsistent. You boast of your love of liberty, your superior civilization, and your pure Christianity, while the whole political power of the nation is solemnly pledged to support and perpetuate the enslavement of 3 millions of your countrymen. You hurl your anathemas at the crowned-headed tyrants of Russia and Austria, and pride yourselves on your democratic institutions, while you yourselves consent to be the mere tools and bodyguards of the tyrants of Virginia and Carolina.
You invite to your shores fugitives of oppression from abroad. Honor them with banquets, greet them with ovations, cheer them, toast them, salute them, protect them, and pour out your money to them like water. But the fugitives from your own land you advertise, hunt, arrest, shoot, and kill. You glory in your refinement and your universal education, yet you maintain a system as barbarous and dreadful as ever stained the character of a nation, a system begun in avarice, supported in pride, and perpetuated in cruelty.
You shed tears over fallen Hungary and make the sad story of her wrongs a theme of your poets, statesmen, and orators, till your gallant sons are ready to fly to arms to vindicate her cause against the oppressor. But in regard to the 10,000 wrongs of the American slave, you would enforce the strictest silence and would hail him as an enemy of the nation who dares to make those wrongs the subject of public discourse. You are all on fire at the mention of liberty for France or for Ireland, but are as cold as an iceberg at the thought of liberty for the enslaved of America.
You discourse eloquently on the dignity of labor, yet you sustain a system which, in its very essence, casts a stigma upon labor. You can bare your bosom to the storm of British artillery to throw off a 3-penny tax on tea, and yet wring the last hard-earned farthing from the grasp of the Black laborers of your country. You profess to believe that of one blood, God made all nations of men to dwell on the face of all the earth, and hath commanded all men everywhere to love one another. And yet you notoriously hate and glory in your hatred all men whose skins are not as colored like your own.
You declare before the world, and are understood by the world to declare, that you hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And yet you hold securely in a bondage which, according to your own Thomas Jefferson, is worse than ages of that which your fathers rose in rebellion to oppose, a seventh part of the inhabitants of your country.
Fellow citizens, I will not enlarge further on your national inconsistencies. The existence of slavery in this country brands your republicanism as a sham, your humanity as a base pretense, and your Christianity as a lie. It destroys your moral power abroad. It corrupts your politicians at home. It saps the foundation of religion. It makes your name a hissing and a byword to a mocking earth.
It is the antagonistic force in your government, the only thing that seriously disturbs and endangers your union. It fetters your progress. It is the enemy of improvement, the deadly foe of education. It fosters pride. It breeds insolence. It promotes vice. It shelters crime. It is a curse to the earth that supports it. And yet you cling to it as if it were the sheet anchor of all your hopes. Be warned. A horrible reptile is coiled up in your nation's bosom. The venomous creature is nursing at the tender breast of your youthful republic. For the love of God, tear away and fling from you the hideous monster, and let the weight of 20 millions crush and destroy it forever.
But it is answered in reply to all this, that precisely what I have now denounced is, in fact, guaranteed and sanctioned by the Constitution of the United States, that the right to hold and to hunt slaves is a part of that Constitution framed by the illustrious fathers of this republic. Then I dare to affirm, notwithstanding all I have said before, your fathers, instead of being the honest men I had before declared them to be, were the veriest impostors that ever practiced on mankind. This is the inevitable conclusion, and from it there is no escape. But I differ from those who charge this baseness of the farmers of the Constitution of the United States. It is a slander upon their memory, at least so I believe, and others have, as I think, fully and clearly vindicated the Constitution from any design to support slavery for an hour.
Allow me to say, in conclusion, notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of the state of the nation, I do not despair of this country. There are forces in operation which must inevitably work the downfall of slavery. I, therefore, leave off where I began, with hope. While drawing encouragement from the Declaration of Independence, the great principles it contains, and the genius of American institutions, my spirit is cheered by the obvious tendencies of the age. Nations do not now stand in the same relation to each other that they did ages ago. No nation can now shut itself up from the surrounding world and trot round in the same old path of its fathers without interference.
The time was when such could be done. But a change has now come over the affairs of mankind. Walled cities and empires have become unfashionable. The arm of commerce has borne away the gates of the strong city. Intelligence is penetrating the darkest corners of the globe. Wind, steam, and lightning are its chartered agents. Oceans no longer divide, but link nations together. From Boston to London is now a holiday excursion. Space is comparatively annihilated. Thoughts expressed on one side of the Atlantic are distinctly heard on the other. In the fervent aspirations of William Lloyd Garrison, I say, and let every heart join in saying it, all Godspeed the day when human blood shall cease to flow, and every clime be understood, the claims of human brotherhood, and each return for evil, good, not blow for blow. That day will come all feuds to end, and change in a faithful friend each foe.
Wow.
That was truly stupendous. Thank you so much, everybody. As we're taking a moment to pause to reflect on the words that have been spoken, I'd like to thank every one of the readers who came and shared their time and their voices and lent their voices to the words of Douglas. I'd like to now invite everybody who came, if you'd like to share reflections. I see a lot of thank yous and wows. And thank you, this was wonderful, beautifully done from people in the chat. But please feel welcome to unmute if you'd like to share any reflections. Dr. Joy, you can speak up.
I mean, I just sit and reflect on it from the opening comment to the last words. Its relevance is critical. And when I think about American canons of literature and speech, I think about Frederick Douglass for multiple reasons, but this particular speech really challenges us to beg the question about who we are as Americans in a time when our politics is confusing. And while the issue of chattel slavery in the United States may not be the one at the forefront, the idea of freedom is. And I think that there's just so much that we can learn as American-born citizens and those who are naturalized or just visiting, whether as refugees or because we want something from this system. There is a lot that we learn from reflecting on Frederick Douglass in this speech. Thank you to all the readers. It was magnificent to hear your voices. Man, I'm always changed by this discussion every year. Thank you so much for doing.
Thank you, Dr. Joy. Auntie Joyce, did you want to say anything?
Yes, I'll just follow up. This is the first year that I did not participate, but it was incredible. And as Dr. Joy just stated, given the fact that our nation, where we are today, is almost reflective of Frederick Douglass's speech back in the 1800s. And we really need to figure out who we are as a nation collectively. So thank you. And thanks to all the readers. You were awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Roberto, did you want to say something?
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for reading. Shirley Satterfield for reminding me about this today. What comes up for me is the power of these words and through the reading. Wealthy, white, heterosexual, male supremacy cultural values are alive and well. They started the country and are still running it. The lies are still perpetrated every day by those who run the country. So I'm glad everyone is here, and I pull us all together with our hearts, our courage, our wisdom, our integrity to change the dream, to make the dream one of really love and integrity, humility, courage. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bullock.
Yes, this is my first time. Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is my first time participating. Thank you, Barbara Fly, for recommending that I come on and join. Thank you, Brother Lord Price, as well. My single question is this now available to us? Is it a download I'd like to share with my family, especially since I've got a family reunion coming up in 2 weeks, about 200 of us are gathering in Virginia. I would love to have a copy of this to share with my family.
Thank you for the question. The program was recorded and it'll be on the library's YouTube channel. I'd be happy to send it out.
Thank you.
Afterwards, once it goes live.
Could you send it out to all of us?
Yes.
Thank you.
I will, of course.
Unbelievable.
Thank you, sweetheart.
Thank you. This is a wonderful way to spend the Monday evening following the 4th of July. It's such sage words spoken so many years ago. And God knows we haven't come that far from that place that we have made some progress.
Thank you.
That's right.
I think beautiful reading. I also listen online to Yale University. They do a wonderful reading as well on July 4th. So it's there on their website. You know, so I thank you for the opportunity tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for allowing me to participate this year. I would love to participate next year as well. This is a communal event that every American citizen should partake in. These words were relevant when he said them, and they're equally relevant today. Many people have chimed in and said.
Thank you. I do want to point out, I did notice a couple of people reflected in the chat that they'd like to sort of have the opportunity to bring this to their communities. It's possible. We borrowed the idea from the Massachusetts Humanities Project, and they have a short version of the speech, the medium abridged version, which we've used, and the full version, all with the parts delineated. So I'm happy if anyone wants more information about how to do this. I'd be happy to share kind of our process and also what Mass Humanities does if you'd like to share this with other communities as well. Although everyone is always welcome to join our community reading, of course.
I just wanted to share really quickly that I would caution us all to remember also the hope. I think for me, that was really profound that, you know, all of the words so steeped with violence, and yet there was this hope he spoke about. And if we don't have that, then we lose a lot of the fuel for the fight. So I would just encourage everyone as we endeavor to advance this notion of justice, that we also consider the hope.
Thank you, Kat.
I think that is so important because the hope also sees the positive in everybody. And I think it's the only way we can do it.
Yes, thank you.
This Barb Fife, that we do this as a community, that we say these powerful words, makes it a spiritual experience for me. I've done it before, but I'm always awed and always proud and always thinking of how insightful Frederick Douglass was, that he's telling us things and experiences and concepts that are happening for us right now if we open the newspaper.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's what struck me so much, was that the words that he spoke back in the 1800s are so relevant today.
Thank you.
the atmosphere that we're experiencing now. We went forward, but then we went 20 steps backwards. That's the way I see it.
Young people don't know anything about this. Our young people are not interested when we try to speak to them about some of these things. And I just don't know what we do to just try to get some of them interested in knowing that we've come ways, but we haven't gone all the way yet. We haven't come all the way yet.
I think part of what we have to do as adults is tell the truth. We have to get other adults to tell the truth. They're always going to turn away from us if we continue to be as hypocritical as so many of us are. And I think the way to bring them into the fold is to tell the truth. Start telling the truth, and to speak it loudly.
I think it starts here with all the people in this room right now. I had to take care of something, and Tazwell, thank you for stepping in. That's one of the younger people in our organization that stepped up. And I was like, listen, I might be a little bit late. Can you hold this down for me? And he may not have gotten a chance to experience all these beautiful people in here sharing Frederick Douglass's speech, the hope, and that's what we do. And I have to echo your sentiments. The younger people, like, we can all be here, but we have to bring them in the room as well and let them feel the energy, the love, and experience how passionate we are about not only this speech, our heritage, and the journey. So thank you so much. I apologize for being tardy. Thank you, Tazwell, for stepping up. And, it's each one teach one, right? So sometimes we raise them and we want them to step up, and they have to take our seat sometimes. So this was a moment in my journey where I needed some help from one of our up and coming leaders, and he was like, I got you. And I love that. So thank you.
Thank you, Keyshawn. Denise, did you want to say something?
Yes, as we get together as a planning committee, we ask ourselves, should we be virtual? Should we try to do it in person? And then we come back always to say, if it's virtual, we always have a recording that we can share. I too will be sharing this with my Davis family. So and once it's up on the library's YouTube, we have it every year. We can go back and look at it. And when we try to invite people to come and be part of it, we can point to that this was year 3, that was year 4. What's going to happen next time? So I just love this community, and I love this speech. It brings tears. It also brings hope. I think hope is exactly what I read about in my talk. So thank you. Thank you, Kim, for doing it for us.
And I just want to say we have a lot of people here who work with young people, Denise,
Excellent.
Wilma, and Ben, and Keyshawn, and Brigitte, and Joy. And I know through seeing their work and seeing what they are doing in the community that they are carrying these messages. And anytime you work with the young people, you can see that they're all right and they're doing good work. So Not in Our Town, one of our partners, honors amazing people in our young people in our community every year who are doing this work for racial justice. I just want to give a moment if anyone has any final words before we close out this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kim.
Thank you, everyone. I have final words.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My final words are to thank Kim for the way she organizes this and makes it easy. And she does a great job. And I
does a brilliant job.
Brilliant job.
Fantastic job.
Thank you, organizers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity, Kim.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Everyone have a
Thank you. Thank you.
Everybody. Good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Kim.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.